Hi, and welcome to The Print. My name is Karanjeet Kaur, and I'm a writer and an editor. Let's talk today about India's Godman problem and how Swami Chaitanya Nanda Saraswati is only the latest entrant on the dishonor rolls. Saraswati is the director of a private engineering and management institute in Delhi's Vasant Kunj and a self-styled spiritual guru. Last week, he was arrested for being on the run for a few days. 17 women students, all scholarship holders from economically weaker sections, have accused him of sexual harassment, obscene messages, and forced late night visits to his room. I wish I could say I was shocked by this horrible news. But shock requires novelty. I'm only fatigued by the tedious predictability of it all. The charges against Saraswati are drawn from the modern Indian Baba starter pack. The checklist includes sexual exploitation of vulnerable women, hidden cameras installed in the women's hostel for leverage, delusions of grandeur in the form of a luxury Volvo with a forged UN diplomatic number plate, and a protective layer of female enablers in positions of authority who allegedly pressured students to comply with the guru's demands. All of these cogs worked in tandem in the well-oiled machinery of coercion. According to the FIR, Saraswati would force female students to visit his room late at night and even accompany him on trips abroad. The WhatsApp messages, which were leaked to the media, reveal the relentless nature of his pursuit. When the students resisted, they were threatened with suspension, expulsion, and their degrees and documents being withheld. One student was allegedly forced to change her name against her will, a particularly disturbing assertion of control. According to reports, Saraswati has repeatedly been lying during interrogation, because this clearly isn't his first rodeo. In 2006 and 2016, molestation cases were registered against him. Yet, in 2025, he was still in charge of an educational institution. The Sringeri Peetham, which runs the institutes, has now severed all ties with him, labeling his conduct illegal, inappropriate, and detrimental. I wonder why this disavowal took so long and arrived only after the investigation went public. The reason Saraswati's case feels almost unremarkable is because it fits so neatly into the ashram industrial complex, which is a sprawling ecosystem where self-styled godmen operate with near total impunity. An opaque shroud covers the goings-on at an ashram, and the guru's power flows on the back of ignorance. Several ashram empires, like those of Asaram and Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh Insan, are spread across townships. They include services like hospitals and educational institutions. In these mini republics, the devotees give Babas carte blanche, and reality, or minor inconvenient facts like conviction by the actual republic, rarely interfere with the Baba's stature. Asaram is serving a life sentence since 2018 for the rape of a minor at his ashram. He has also been implicated in multiple murder cases. But his followers, who are estimated to be in the region of 2 crore spread across 400 ashrams globally, maintain that the conviction was a media-orchestrated conspiracy. The empire, which brought in an annual revenue of 350 crore rupees in 2021, continues to function. Gurmeet Ram Rahim was convicted in 2017 for the rape of 2 female disciples and later for the murder of a journalist. His followers responded to that by unleashing mass riots across Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Delhi. They burnt vehicles and attacked railway stations, leaving over 30 people dead and property damage in hundreds of crores. Ram Rahim's own net worth is estimated at around 1,455 crore rupees. Similarly, Rampal's followers staged a 3-day armed standoff with Haryana police in 2014, when authorities attempted to execute a court warrant and arrest him. Baba's commandos held off the police armed with acid pouches, sticks and stones, and allegedly lobbed petrol bombs at them. The siege of his Satlok ashram ended with multiple deaths. Now, the logical endpoint of the mini-republic model is secession. Case in point, the endlessly memified Nityanand, who is accused of rape, child abuse, and kidnapping. He fled India and declared the establishment of Kailasa, his own sovereign nation. Before he fled, the net worth of his foundation was believed to be 10,000 crore rupees. There are 3 pillars that hold up the ashram industrial complex: opaque finances enabled by toothless laws governing India's religious trusts, political protection in exchange for mobilized vote banks, and a layer of institutional enablers. But none of this would exist if the Baba wasn't filling a gap in society. The dignity and sense of belonging, however illusory, that organized religion has failed to provide so many Indians. This desperation cuts across class, caste, and gender lines. In Punjab and Haryana, deras like Sacha Sauda draw followers from disadvantaged Dalit and OBC communities. The dera offers what temples and gurudwaras have denied them. In an op-ed written in the aftermath of the 2017 riots, senior Congress leader Shashi Tharoor had said, "A key message of Sikhism, equality among the faithful, has in the past inspired people from the lower Hindu castes to convert. But so deep is the prejudice in Indian society that many converted Sikhs found that their new co-religionists of higher castes, who dominate the faith's official religious bodies, treated them no better than Hindus had. The deras," Tharoor said, helped reduce addiction and replaced anomie with community. So successive governments also embraced them. The rioting that ensued Ram Rahim's conviction grew from the fear of facing marginalization once again. Tharoor wrote, "They are willing to kill for him because, as they might see it, they would really be killing for themselves." No rioting or killing is involved at the other end of the spectrum, where the Guruji Brigade or followers of Nirmal Singh Maharaj sits ensconced in luxury. But the spiritual needs and marginalization felt by Delhi's elite and Bollywood is the same as that of a Dera member. Underpinning this mass appeal is a financial scaffolding, upheld by loosely framed laws and the lack of regulatory oversight that enables ashram empires to run almost unchecked. As a report in the Economic Times points out, religious trusts control crores of assets, and with a few exceptions like the Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam and Mumbai Siddhi Vinayak Temple, most do not make their accounts public. Often, there is little transparency about who is in control of these funds and how these guardians are appointed. The report said, when the religious outfit is a revered individual, it's even harder to ascertain affairs since questioning is seen as tantamount to heresy. Another analysis notes that Indian law does not sufficiently regulate anonymous donations to religious trusts. There is no way to guarantee that a donation is genuinely anonymous. This effectively means that an ashram can act as a black money laundering conduit. Then, there are few meaningful restrictions on how religious trusts can spend the money they receive, as long as 85% of donations are theoretically disbursed for the trust's stated purposes. The rest is fair game, unless the Enforcement Directorate comes knocking on your door, as it did earlier this year with Changur Baba. The agency has been collecting IT returns for the last 10 years from 40 entities suspected of being shell companies that were allegedly created and operated by the Baba and his associates. 6 overseas bank accounts linked to these entities were used to route large sums from Arab nations that were in turn used to purchase properties worth 100 crore in Uttar Pradesh, Pune, and Nagpur. In addition to real estate, ED sources found that the Baba had spent lakhs on foreign breed horses and dogs. This opaqueness is built into the system, said Naman Saraiya, who is the director of My Daughter Joined a Cult, a docu-series on Nityanand. His research revealed that an inner circle of 20 to 30 people is in charge of running and managing the cult, bound together by mutually assured destruction. Secrets help maintain the hierarchy, and to pledge allegiance, you give them information about your life. Saraiya said that these could be early financial records or compromising photos. He told me, in Nityanand's case, all the compromising information was stored in the cloud. This inner circle then lives in fear of each other. Everyone is on edge. Everyone is trying to one-up the other. The compromised often become the compromisers, manipulated into exploiting others. Saraiya pointed out that it took a long time for Nityanand to fall out of political favor. That's partly because no political faction is immune to the charms of Babas. Every party, every ideology has patronized them. Indira Gandhi was famously a disciple of Dhirendra Brahmachari, who was dubbed India's Rasputin for his influence over the Gandhis. Her Home Minister and later PM, P.V. Narasimha Rao, fell under the sway of Chandraswamy, a tantric who claimed that he could read minds. In 2007, UPA presidential candidate Pratibha Patil had declared that the spirit of Dada Lekhraj, who'd been dead since 1969, had told her that more responsibility awaited her. And in 2013, the same government authorized the Geological Survey of India as well as the Archaeological Survey of India to dig up a 19th century palace. This was based on Godman Shobhan Sarkar's dream that 1,000 tons of gold was buried underneath the structure. Somewhere in India, another Chaitanya Nanda Saraswati is plotting to exploit vulnerable women in his ashram. Another trust is accepting anonymous donations that will never be audited. The walls of unreason are fortified by legal loopholes and political compromise. But it's our collective, willful blindness that has laid the foundation.